We're going to go ahead and get started. We are back from exec. Moira is in the house and is sitting, and Moira will sit while the rest of us stand and do the pledge. And Brad, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome, and we are back. There's been extended exec session, much to discuss. We've done the pledge, and Brad, I think there's a...
Actually, it's on the agenda. The item there.
So this is already on?
It's 9:26.
All right, the various whereases and now therefore.
It's all there.
Already
Yep.
there. All right. Okay, so we're going to keep rolling because Pat has places to go. Apparently has a light outside. But
No, I just like to be efficient.
and Sean is out of Sean's not here tonight. And actually, we are 6 tonight. We are missing 3 with other obligations. But you know who you child nutrition. There you go. There you go. You're signed up, and feel free to introduce yourselves and let's see.
Do you want us to stay here where we are?
Oh, you can sit here if you wish.
It's your choice.
Okay, how about I'm here so that I can look
You
at
are
everybody in the room.
you are on camera wherever you may be.
Any place.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great.
Exactly.
Hi everybody, good evening and thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Lara Parilla and I'm here tonight with Audrey Baker, Meredith, Jen Meredith, Holly Payne, and we're part of the Childhood Nutrition Collaborative. We are here as a group, we're a cross-sector group of organizations and agencies, not all of us are here tonight. But part of our group is the Ithaca City School District. And together we have our sights set steadily on the shared goal of ensuring that all young people have access to nourishing food every day so that they're able to thrive and reach their potential. Beth Krause, who's the Ithaca City School District Child Nutrition Director, continues to be an active member of our collaborative. And what she does is she helps bridge connections with the child nutrition team, as well as Farm to Table, which is spearheaded by Lori Paddington from Cayuga Heights Elementary School. Several key Ithaca City School District staff, and also nonprofit members of our community, such as the Coalition for Healthy School Food, Cornell Cooperative Extension, and the Youth Farm Project, who work directly with her team. Beth would have been here tonight, but she's taking her daughter to karate and choir practice, so she regrets she can't be here. So the reason we're here tonight is to give you a very brief update on some of the progress that we've made as a collaborative since we met with Dr. Brown, Eldridge, Pat, and Brad back in June. So we are hoping to plan for more collaborative planning. We started into the Conference County Farm to School project, now funded by New York State. I'll talk about that a bit more briefly. So in 2018, we saw some significant advances in including school meals for all students, not least of which was the implementation of universal school meals in fall 2018, and that is happening at St. Martin Elementary School and Enfield Elementary School. And we'd like to applaud ICSD school staff for this direction. In 2019, we are keen to ensure the success and increase student participation in school breakfast and lunch, as they are critical to nourishing our young people, as well as ensuring that students have access to nutritious food outside of the school day and the school year.
Hi everyone, I'm going to continue. I'm Audrey Baker with the Cornell Master of Public Health Program and the Youth Farm Project. So we also recognize the need to work nutrition and food into the K-12 while building community support and local will. help increase the amount of regionally grown produce served in school lunches across the county, as well as food awareness and consumption of fresh, healthy, and whole foods. Research shows that exposure to local food and nutrition education can children's willingness to provide quality of food. And over the coming months, we're excited to work closely with high school community and private summarize the count of really every single priority that we try to what we've done across all of our what our goals
So the CNC is a partnership. Is it an organization? We're coming together under the
and the idea is to look at everybody's plans and then come together under overarching work plans and really kind of looking for interaction so that we're actually shifting the way we do business across the sector. It's been a massive project since January 2016.
we're
ICSD
excited.
is a huge project.
We're excited. I'm trying to ask a much more pragmatic question. Those umbrellas are big.
The Farm to School grant is, fiscal sponsor is Colonel Property Extension of Montana County, and I'm going to be hiring a Farm to School coordinator, 32 hours a week, who I will supervise, and also have with the support of this amazing collaborative, including evaluation support from the United
What's the total amount?
90 to 70 something over 2 years. Yeah.
It's pretty much entirely for the Farm School coordinator position. Largely that decision came from conversations with Park Foundation, who is very interested in funding food service trainings and the continuing improvements in nutrition education initiatives and food-based education initiatives. So they're doing food service training and nutrition, and so the coordination, especially around procurement and just bringing these districts to the table is what they saw the biggest need for, and it makes sense. So we're trying to sort of bring districts all together right now, talk about geographic bidding and how we can really coordinate purchasing on a New York State level, and then by bringing all of these districts together at the end of this month, we then can start conversations around how to coordinate better around food service training and education, and have the Park Foundation.
Last question. I'm assuming we're aiming towards the brew model, which you spoke so highly of in the meeting.
The Food and Health Network
Brew county model.
of the Rural Health Network is working with us, and they are the Farm to School lead for Broome Tioga BOCES.
But technically, we're actually going to, on a bidding strategy level, go probably closer to the Adirondack Farm to School project model, because Broome Tioga has one overarching BOCES that does the food service, and they can put in all the bids for all of the districts under those, whereas we don't have that, as you know. And so the Adirondack Farm to School project had a strategy where they sort of put together their own cooperative and submitted bids under entities that weren't actually organized, just like ours. And so it exists, state ed approves, we've talked with state ed, everything has a model and a way forward, so.
And I think the one thing that we might have left out is that if we help the schools get to 30% of their purchases being New York State foods, grown or even processed in New York State, schools will have an extra 19 cents per meal, totaling 25 altogether reimbursement for every meal that's sold.
And that starts next year, this upcoming?
So they need a full year of tracking this information, and then they'll be able to get the extra.
So we're starting to plan now for the entirety of next year, with the goal of getting as many districts in the county up to that 30% level that feel like participating, working with a food hub, Headwater Food Hub, to really try to make it possible.
Thank you.
And I would just request, don't limit yourself when you're setting up meetings to just the board members that you met with before, send it to the whole board. There's others on the lead.
You're all invited.
So,
We'll resend the email to everybody.
right, exactly. That's
Thank you.
And as Rob would say, I don't know why I didn't say it, dairy, dairy, dairy.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh man, I could talk to you so much about dairy and beef right now. I feel like I've been having meetings about dairy and beef every day. I have. But no.
It was a sad day for me when they took ice cream sandwiches.
Me too, right?
No, I'm sorry. No, it's just, that's how I got through the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And my mother was a school lunch director in Ithaca for a couple of decades, but she at least had ice cream sandwiches there. Thanks, Mom. But it was not a bad thing back then. So, I'm not seeing a lot more public here, but any other, I think Bob never has anything to say, so we're okay. So let's go on to student reps, and I'm gonna start with LICS because I'm looking at lots of this guy. So, hey, how are you?
Good, how are you? So let's see, last week we had a school-wide discussion to change our school's morning community meeting, where people can share announcements and events happening in and around our school community. We as a school decided to make some changes to its structure that would make it a little more structured and thus more productive. So our entire school is going to officially vote on whether or not we agree with that tomorrow. A group of seniors are working with a 4th grade class at South Hill on a case study to explore religion and its role in the ICSD academic calendar. The group sent out a survey to all ICSD students between 3rd and 12th grade asking about their religious beliefs. The theater group is putting on a production of Into the Woods next weekend, and it's pretty heavily student organized, and it's musical play is directed by the music director at R2P. And tonight, I think right now though actually, the music department is having its winter concert, which includes performances from a mariachi band, a street band, and a concert band. And then finally, coming up later on in February, our school is having its Infusion Week, which is, I think, pretty largely organized by students, where community members will come into our school and share about issues revolving around community.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
Ithaca High.
Hello. So our annual winter formal dance, which was organized it was organized by the senior class, took place at Lake Watch Inn last Saturday from 7 to 10 p.m. and was open to all students. Over 360 tickets were sold. Wow. The spring musical Wren also held its auditions this past Friday. Students and staff are also gearing up for the end of the first semester with midterms next week.
So due to the initiative of Green Team, IHS has decided to get rid of plastic cups for the water coolers, and all students are now encouraged to bring in water bottles or get a water bottle for the main office. So as for clubs, Molly UN Club had its second conference of this year at Syracuse University this past weekend, and overall it was a very successful conference and a great educational experience for many people. Yesterday, IHS's Swiss Club, which stands for Supporting Women in Catholic Society, and IHS's Mental Health Club, Active Minds, had a collaborative meeting which focused on body image and self-love with record attendance.
I think the high school brain team has jumped to 13th place in the national rankings that were published this past weekend. And this is the highest ranking for any team from New York and one of the highest for traditional public high schools in the country. And I think the high school senior class is hosting a pancake breakfast on Saturday, January 27th from 8 to 11 a.m., which is, it's going to be taking place at the Loyal Order of the Moose on Elmira Road. And unfortunately, none of us are selling tickets right now, but if you contact Irina Rosenberg at irina.rosenberg@icsd.k12.nyc.us, you can hear more about that and buy tickets from her.
In recent news for winter sports, yesterday girls hockey beat previously undefeated and major rival Skinny Atlas 1-0.
Nice.
Boys hockey also won 4-1 against Cicero North Syracuse, and the boys basketball team won their game last night as well.
Against Vestal.
Yes.
We don't like Vestal, but go ahead.
It's just the green color.
Yeah, it's just. Anything else? No, very good, thanks. Board responses. E, go ahead.
To the lovely high school students who I cannot see, I don't want to gloss over what you said about the auditions for the play. Could you help the audience understand here and for the TV audience at home how that looked different? How it came to be that that one was selected? And have you seen any differences in the auditions from
You're talking about the choice of play?
the choice of play?
Well, so I can speak to that a little. So for this year, this was the first year students actually voted on what musical they wanted to be held. They had 2 musicals, Little Shop of Horror and Rent, and then students could also recommend musicals. And Rent won with the most amount of votes. And then for the audition process, that was a little different. From what I've heard, some of the roles they actually haven't called anyone back for callbacks for if no one auditioned that fit the part, because Rent is a very specific story with very specific characters, and they just couldn't find people to fill them yet. So I know they're going to be reaching out into the school community to try to find people that actually embody that role to play the characters.
Right, and the thing that took place this past Friday, it was an orientation, and I think that was designed so that the offerings in the musical theater department could be a little bit more inclusive and open to people who are not normally participating in those. So they kind of went over a description of what the play is like and what being in musical theater is like, which is not something that's normally touched on. And I think that's important given that they're trying to make offerings in the musical theater department more inclusive to everyone.
And that orientation session was led by Cynthia Henderson, who is a professor at IC.
I just want to publicly thank Samantha Little, who's sitting here, and Daphne Shazulu, who seems to have disappeared for basically re-engineering an entire process. It's important that we all recognize where we are now, from where we are when these babies were sitting in this right in front of us last year, talking about the incident at the play. So thank you very much for participating for that effort.
Any other stuff?
I also have a question for the young man to the left, LACS. Could you talk a little about how the morning meeting was structured, or unstructured? What you think we may be moving towards, just a little bit, so we could wrap up knowledge around that.
So yeah, I was actually part of the group that is involved in that, and I ended up taking quite a leadership role. So it's a morning meeting, and it pretty much had no structure, so you come in and line up and make as many announcements as as could fit in that time period. And it wasn't required, so kids would wander off, and that was a safety concern. So the principal ended that, and then basically put a pause on it until we came up with a better way to structure it. And so we're just restructuring it by categorizing types of announcements. So the announcement that you make is categorized into community announcements, fundraising announcements, and birthday announcements. So it's broken into those three categories. And then I think we implemented, or we're trying to implement that like a hand raising system where someone raises their hand and you allow. This is trying to make sure and then also the kids who being within the community meeting. Distracting or there can be distraction from themselves or other, we also could create an alternative space and participation approval of key volume and yoga and meditation and quiet along those lines. So other ways.
I never think of, I think high school why don't we because we why don't we just leave that? I'm sorry, I'm right, that's correct. That's why you're here. But we won't, anything else, on that. We're good, can we go to consent?
Everybody else? Consent agenda.
Dr. Brown, now we.
Thank you for the opportunity. A couple items. The new edition of the ICSD Insider Ballot. And you have hard copies from you. And as always, this has been emailed to all families. We're starting to email students now. I hope you got an email this week. And if not, you're going to be getting one as we're going to be sharing this out widely. This one is packed with a lot of information, updates, and instructional conversations. So check it out if you haven't had a chance to check that out. Also, if I can turn your attention to our website, we added a new feature to our website. One thing we said at convocation is the way to build a culture is to repeatedly put out examples of the kind of culture you're trying to build. And as part of our commendation ceremonies, we've been adding in a section on culture of love, and folks have been nominating people who they see representing the kind of culture of love that we are saying we want to be a part of. And we've added a place on our website. So if you go to the website now, the first thing you see is that little red tag there that says culture of love, and then clicking on that, you will, and these are screenshots, you can do it live at your device, but it'll bring up a home page there, and we're asking folks in our community, in the school district, outside of the school district, to submit examples that they think are consistent with our approach to a culture of love. And we outlined the principles there. You can go see the principles and what we define the culture of love as, and what are some examples of that. And some folks have already submitted some things. These are some of the ones we recognized at convocation and throughout the year, but folks have already been sending some stories in, including Mike Nemhard, his approach to selflessness, and how he's always going above the call of duty, and he's sacrificing his personal time, his professional time, to do what's right by young people. So we've launched this site, and we're getting folks already submitting nominations to be on this site, and we're asking you to spread the word too as well. And again, you can get to this from that tag on our homepage. Those are my updates for tonight. other than the best basketball team in the country is playing tonight against another one.
I was thinking the same thing. Wasn't that last night?
There's another number one team. At 8 o'clock.
Did they have colors similar to the team that won last night?
Thanks for that, Dr. Brown, and for the cryptic shout out to.
They play tips. That was from that.
Speaking of Samantha, athletics update, can we move on to that?
Yeah.
Because we like to do that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit about fall mostly, but I will share, I was running late, and the reason why I was running late is because our boys swim and dive team just won their 70th straight swim meet. And that's dating back to since January 2010. So exciting. And girls JV basketball defeated Vestal by 2 points. So when I left, it was tied. So
Varsity's playing.
Varsity's playing now.
They would have started.
Yes, yep. So, want to share a little bit. Oh, does anybody notice or wonder anything about that, any of the pictures in there?
That's Bob and Kim right there. He's such a stand.
I was going to go there. Yeah, but just to show what, some of the collaborations in the athletic department. Mary Grover was also there. I don't know, I think, yeah, you're in there, Dr. Brown was in there, Brad Pollock, so. The admin team always comes to several of the football games, and they always dedicate working in the concession stand for one of the games, so.
It helps with math skills.
It does, they have to make correct change.
Make change, right.
Yeah, you can go to the next one, thanks. So I'm gonna share some of the fall achievements from this fall. 8 out of our 10 fall teams received the New York State Public High School Association academic honors. And in order to receive that, you have to have a 90% average or better. So super proud of our fall teams, and we're looking to achieve that same number in the winter and spring. 5 out of our 10 fall sports teams won Section 4 titles and or a stack championship. So we had varsity girls soccer, and they haven't won a Section 4 championship since 2000. Girls swim and dive, and girls tennis, and Asha was a part of the girls tennis program, so we were Section 4 champs. In addition to that, the girls tennis program was undefeated in the regular season. And then our JV girls soccer and varsity boys soccer were stack champions. And we also had a New York State 8th grader named Runner of the Year in cross country, and Sasha Coyote, I believe is how you pronounce it. And we had 5 students who, is that how you say his name? Coyote, is it Coyote? Okay, that's how it's spelled. And we had 5 students from girls lacrosse that are headed to Division I programs. 3 out of the 5 are graduating seniors, so 2 of them have committed to schools their junior year. And so some of them are headed to Ohio State, Canisius, Albany, and Louisville. So excited about that. You can go to the next one, please. So, and just talking a little bit about our athletic programming. Overall, we offer 28 sports, and we have over 100 coaches. And what we're doing this year is really working to analyze and be responsive and constantly look at how we're improving the culture of our programming, and then also making sure that we're celebrating our successes. So a couple examples, we have streamlined data for educators and for staff in the district by having a flag and school tool. So in-season student athletes are identified by a flag. And it's really just helpful for missing classes in addition to the reminders that we send. We are collaborating with IC to address some of the mental health needs and social emotional supports that our students have requested out of Captain's Council, and we're hoping to continue that collaboration. So we have mental performance coaches that work with our fall teams. They'll be working with winter and spring teams as well, and they've also been coming and doing some modeling with our Captain's Council because they're graduates at IC. We have working with Amanda and Lily and Mary and Carrie Kerr, we've developed these cards, and Daphne as well, Shalulu, we have developed these cards. They're called You Helped cards, and what we're trying to do is to ensure that there aren't any barriers for participation. So families that are supporting with transportation They are allowed 10 free entries into of their choice, whether the arts or athletics. So those cards we're giving out. And we're partnering with food services. Oh, you can go back, sorry. We're partnering with food services. You will see those water bottles, and we will work on getting reusable water bottles, but we are, in our meals, they are now providing team meals for our student athletes at a, really inexpensive rate. And then we're doing some fundraising with them. Jamie Zervos has been amazing. And we put these stickers on and they sell pies. And Girls Swim and Dive sold pies in the fall. So we're looking at just different ways to collaborate and also make sure that our logo gets out there. And we're looking at increasing our sports offerings and providing different platforms for what the traditional word that you used before. We're making sure that students have access. So for instance, we don't have a boys volleyball team, but if a boy wanted to join the girls volleyball team, they would have the ability to do that. We have Kid Fit programming at Boynton at DeWitt to promote health and well-being, and also to try to help some of those students that maybe didn't see themselves as athletes or weren't interested in sports at the elementary level to start to create some awareness around that. And then we have a new initiative with esports. Heather Williams, she works in our IT department. She came to me and we talked with Dr. Brown, and then Karen Seifert is heading up esports. So it's an opportunity for students. It is through gaming, but they're also creating gaming and sometimes building their own systems. So we've started an esports club and we're kicking that off this year. Some of the ways that we celebrate is with our fall, winter, and spring guides that our sports boosters do, tweeting announcements during school. Hope you guys do hear them. Okay. In our college signing ceremony. We had one in the fall and we'll have another in the spring. If you want to look at that next slide, we'll look a little bit at at our data. That yellow fall participation, you can dive deeper into our data. Lynn Vanderwert does an amazing job of compiling information for us around participation. And if you look at last year to this year, there's like a one student difference. It's about 16, it was 16.7% in the fall of last year, and this year it was 16.8%. So while that increase isn't what we want it to be, we are looking at ways to try to increase.
And so do some kids, they must participate in more than one sport?
They do, this is just fall.
Exactly,
So just fall. Mhm.
but some of these same kids might then go
We do.
to the spring.
We have, and Lynn, and that will be in that fall
She
participation.
does a non-duplicated count.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
yeah.
And she has the multi-sport athlete in there as well. So if there are questions, you can talk to me about that at another time regarding that. But it's interesting that 21.5% of the participation in sports in the fall comes directly from the high school. So we're also looking at what's going on at the middle school, hence the Kid Fit programming and things of that nature.
So this is just the high school though, right?
No, this is students who are participating modified through varsity.
So where do we go for all those students who are currently in football as their parents don't allow them to play anymore? Where are we gonna head with 75 young people who are presently in football?
Mhm.
As more, I mean, you can see the number went down from 89 to
Mhm.
75. If you continue to see that decline, what are we gonna do programming wise for those folks?
Yeah, and we did have quite a few seniors graduate last year, but in term, so Clarence Welch is our new football coach, and we have met with the Youth Bureau and some other programs locally just to talk about that and what do we need to do? How can we get a resurgence around football? So we're looking at starting a youth league in collaboration with the Youth Bureau, and then also just, having more of a face, so to speak, out there. Clarence and his staff are looking at doing more camps and clinics over the summer. And then seeing, sometimes there are schools that will contact us and say, hey, we only have a couple players, we might have to think about merging potentially, just till we build those numbers up. But we're definitely kind of putting a full court press on, so to speak, in terms of being more visible in the community and reaching out to families, making personal phone calls, finding out why kids are participating or not participating is a big thing as well.
Right. Thank you.
And obviously some schools, neighboring districts are going to 8-man football.
Correct.
obviously smaller schools, but again, participation numbers.
Are down across the board.
Right.
Yeah.
There's not enough, well, big guys, let's put it that. It's,
The news
yeah.
is not good for parents to put their kids in football.
Right, remind me again.
We're also doing some education, sorry, just because we have a certified athletic trainer on staff. And if you'll go on our website, she did talk about concussions and the likelihoods of them happening and things of that. So we're also trying to do that parental, family,
Sure.
education piece.
And not to, remind me again, there's never concussions in soccer or anything, right?
That's
Right.
them.
Oh, no,
I know.
Right,
Yeah.
going up and hitting the ball with your head, then banging and hitting together, and it happens quite often, and lacrosse, hockey,
Mhm.
and frankly, many other sports that, yeah, so, anyway.
They're in the news.
Yeah.
They probably should be.
Yeah. That's it.
And,
That's the difference.
no, I don't count how many concussions I've ever had. I never had, but go ahead. Samantha.
Yeah, and I mean, and part of that will speak to, we're looking at creating an intramural program for sixth graders. I think that too, when we can only start in seventh grade, and providing that access. So I think that might, hopefully support our efforts. And the other piece with this data that I just want to note is, this isn't necessarily a true reflection of how athletics is impacting our school community. And that's something that I've got to work with Lynn on getting some data. I mean, we have students that are announcing at games, we have students that are coming to the games, we have students that are writing stories. So we really want to look at that word participation in a global sense, and just the way that athletics and the arts, how are they really affecting the student body and enhancing, our community. So those are some things that we're going to look at. Any other questions about the data?
Well, back in the day, used to be student volunteers, managers, trainers, I mean, just getting into that. I mean,
Right.
do kids still do that, or?
They
is it-
do,
Okay.
and we also collaborated with IC for a athletic training program this
Right,
year,
right.
where
Sorry.
students volunteered and signed up. So yeah, just finding other entry points. You don't have to be the one on the field or in the pool or in the court,
Right.
but to be a part of what's happening and to learn some of those soft skills that we talk about. Did you have
Sorry.
a question?
Talk to us a little about the integration of the tutorial program with athletics. How we take advantage of having a captive audience to introduce the idea of PSAT, ACT, SAT, and then whether or not we move forward with trying to make sure all the coaches at least are capable of having that college career readiness conversation with the kids on their team.
Well, we're really fortunate this year, we instituted an athletic compliance officer in Stephanie Valletta, and she is a special education teacher at the high school and also a coach. She coaches our unified sports and also our JV girls basketball program. So we've really set up some systems, and that is something that we're talking with Dr. Brown about in our academic board policy, and we'll bring that to the policy committee for review. And we've also partnered this year, because some of the work that Stephanie is doing with the village in Ithaca, and we've got some of those tutors coming over. So in terms of, specifically speaking about PSATs or SATs, that stuff, not so much. We're using our school counselors, partnering with them to do that. But what we are doing is making athletic study hall, which we're now offering Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 o'clock in the morning to 8:45, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays 4 to 5 o'clock. The stigma that's around that's what we're working on. So we're asking teams to send their entire team. When you go off, if you're gonna play college athletics, you're gonna be in study hall 4 or 5 days out of the week. So we're trying to work that piece into it. And then also, we've had some speakers come in from Pennsylvania to talk with our coaches about that piece, because it is something that we really need to improve on, that college career and helping the students to really fulfill their aspirations. At the end of each season, we have a student survey that we're putting out, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but Coach Valletta also does a survey with the Captain's Council to find out areas that are in need of improvement, and that has been one area that students are saying they just don't feel like they're getting enough support in. So from that data, and now knowing that, we're gonna work together and create some different practices. We've developed a team, an academic working group within the department. It's comprised of some coaches and a parent. We're looking for a student rep, and then hopefully we'll be able to move some of that work forward survey on the academic piece. So we started Captain's Council last year, and at the request of students, they wanted a way to share their experiences, but also that it be anonymous, but that they could be real and honest. So we created a survey, and the survey addressed like overall demographics, the head coach, academic experience, school policies, college athletic aspirations, the student athlete experience, and in Ithaca values. So up here just shares a little bit some of the anecdotal information from some of the students in the fall. We'll do it again in the winter and in the spring. And then from that, I remember when I was at South Hill, I always did a survey for the staff to share about my practice. So we did the same thing with the athletic department to allow coaches to share their experiences. And then there's just some anecdotal, quotes from coaches. Next year, I'm hoping to add the family piece because to that student survey, because I think it's really important that we're also including the families. And then eventually, hopefully, the coaches. And we're building those surveys, kind of as we implement them. The coaches survey covered things like facilities and transportation, interaction between the athletic department and coaches, responsiveness, things of that nature. The last slide. Just wanted to talk to you about a couple next steps for Ithaca Athletics and things that we're looking to do. We're looking at finding additional ways to unify our community. We'd like to work with Jonathan Shine and our student production team and try to broadcast some games live. Some of our counterparts, Corning and some other schools are already doing that. We want to have some more outreach to our prestigious alumni. We have amazing alumni and folks that want to help, and I feel like that's a really underdeveloped area, so reaching out to our alumni. I was so moved by Iman's service and to see how many students came back from college on Saturday to attend that. So we talked about possibly with the sports boosters having like an alumni dinner, so we're not just getting together for reasons like that. So that's on the horizon. We want to see what other unified sports we can add. We don't have bowling here, but that is another sport that's really easy to add for unified sports. So that's something that I'm talking to the league about. And then this is a pie in the sky dream. I'd love us all to be like cardinal and gold at every school, all 12 schools. We can keep it our identity, that we'd be all cardinal and gold, so we'd all be the same school color.
I vaguely remember this coming up once when you were a principal. And we thought about having every school have the same color thing. You were the one who said no.
No. I said mascot. No, I said not the same mascot, Dr. Brown. Everybody would have their own identity, but we'd all be, think about how cheap it would be from a facility standpoint. No, I said mascot. I don't want to take anybody's mascot. But I do think us all being cardinal goals would be awesome. Anyway.
We're red and black.
You mean paint?
Pardon?
Paint, cardinal gold ball.
Yeah, like the school
Some
colors.
of our elementary schools
Yeah.
have different colors.
Yeah, we're all different colors, which is fine, but it would just be one way to unify us. We're all cardinal and gold.
Didn't even notice.
No,
Sounds
I
good to
didn't.
me.
You caught
Okay.
it.
Make it so, Amanda.
Amanda, it'd be much cheaper from a facility
Make it so, Amanda.
They don't have the number?
Yeah, and then we're just continuing to look at ways to increase participation and just create an inclusive environment for all, so, thank you.
We're gonna go into other projects, but, other presentations. We're in budget season all year long. So I have to ask, we're always looking and doing the ask. We've got 100 assistant coaches. We used to have more than that back in the day, I'm sure. So how are we doing staff-wise? How are, program needs? We've added some sports. That was a budget decision. We had to vote on that. So what are we looking at going into 1920?
Yeah, we're looking at basically kind of holding where we are right now. We're looking to increase in some areas, but for the most part, the 100 coaches, we are fortunate that we have a lot of people that volunteer in the community. If we didn't have that, it would be very difficult
Right, we
offering
see the
20 sports.
volunteers that are the unpaid volunteers,
Yes.
but they have to be approved and certified.
Go through New York State regulations, all that. We did add a couple coaching positions last year though, for some of our larger teams, some assistant coaches at basketball and soccer. So And we are actually adding a modified girls volleyball program this year. We have 2 modified, girls modified volleyball. We're adding, because all of our other boys modified sports have 2. So we're looking to try to increase that. So that will be one increase. But then we're also looking at our strength and conditioning and ways to enhance and improve that programming, just from an injury prevention standpoint, and then just kind of that's going to be that piece that's really going to get some of those football players and people that want to be in there, gaining the physical strength, as well as it's a lot of mental preparation and strength training that happens in there too, in the weight room. So we are looking at increasing the weight room. And
It's not a facility issue, it is
no,
programming.
No, it's programming,
Right.
programming. So we can, our coaches have some skills and ability to work and train the teams. We're also looking at cross-training and it not just being about lifting weights, but agility and cardio and, so otherwise we're.
And obviously a part of, or obviously not, but certainly we've been at meetings all across the district talking about the 2019 facilities bond that is coming up in May. And certainly a part of that is dealing with some issues with fields and athletic facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Not only at high school, but
District-wide.
District-wide,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
So to that point, like DeWitt and others.
Northeast.
Right.
Mhm.
These fields that are just, really need some attention.
Mhm.
There's gonna be an opportunity to deal with that.
Yes,
That's in the plans.
it's in the plan.
All right. Thanks, Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Brown, do we want to do Susan first and then Amanda?
Yeah, please, Susan first.
Right.
Yeah.
We're just gonna,
I've been waiting to get a up close look at that picture all night. I love it.
It's a celebration over at my school.
That is fire.
We might become Cardinal and Gold. I will say, you guys did an amazing job figuring out to hire her for that position. That was a great report. That was well thought. That was just not about sports.
Yeah.
That was good. Anyway, hi.
welcome.
I am, my direction from Lily Talcott was to look at 3 different initiatives going on in our school. So that's what we're looking at. And Tricia was kind enough to also give you a printout because there's a lot of little bulleted things. And I didn't want to go on and on and on if there are things that you would rather ask questions about in terms of how we use our time. But Beverly J. Martin Elementary School, our scholars, that front thing there is intended to show you a range of ways of learning. So you have the more traditional, should we use that word? Small group up there, small group there unpacking a text. They're reading a novel together. In the far right corner, you see kids with their flashlights are actually studying light. They're studying light. Down the corner again, a math lesson, a little more traditional looking with the manipulatives. But this other stuff, we're calling that loose parts play. Those red and green things, they were built up as a wall in our playground that nobody ever climbed on. So it was boring. So we took it apart and just left the parts lay around, and they are building things and sliding them on a little hill and dragging each other around on them and having a great time. So, but the first slide, the first initiative that I want to talk about, it's not an initiative, but the case studies. The case studies in our building are in every grade level, and I just wanted to highlight the first grade case study that they've been working on. What flies? How's it fly? The kids' inquiry on this starts with a whole lot of questions about flight, and I was trying to figure out how they were going to learn about thrust. Like, how do you learn about thrust when you're 6? It seems complex. But the teachers had them stand and jump high and touch a wall, and then figure out what it would take for them to jump higher than their first mark on the wall. And what would it take to go even higher? And they came to understand that that burst of energy became thrust. And then they tried to do that sideways, but kicking off a wall and pushing themselves forward on this stuff. It was awesome. So anyway, if you look at the bulleted list, you see the kinds of things that they got involved in, and some of those photos show us kids actually designing and experimenting and then revising their work and then experimenting and then seeing somebody else's work and how come theirs flew and mine didn't fly and what's the shape of the wings. They looked at crash videos of the Wright brothers to figure out why they couldn't make that thing fly when they would fall down those sand dunes. It raised questions of whether or not humans could fly, what would it take to have enough thrust and lift. We went over to the airport. One of the things that was really cool is that they opened up the baggage claim for us, and the kids all ran around inside. We also went over to the Brindley Street original airplane factory just to get a little boost of that history of Ithaca. And one of the things that was really sweet, and I had the opportunity to be doing an official observation at the time this happened, where some kids started saying, well, leaves fly and balloons fly, and then we came, well, no, that's floating. Well, then what's the difference between floating and flying? And then that became a next conversation about gravity and friction. And by the time they were sledding in January, when there wasn't quite enough snow, the kids started saying, look, we're frictioning the snow. And so they were taking the concepts that they had learned in their conversation about floating and turned it into sledding, which was pretty awesome. So this is a super first grade team. Also, they're fine tuning this case study, and then they connected as they study birds. They connected with the fifth graders who study birds with the Lab of O. And this year we're gonna take that in another direction. So that's what's going on with first grade. Fifth grade. One of the things that's happening with fifth grade is we're developing a very strong leadership component as a requirement of the grade. We haven't turned it into the requirement part. That's going to come by the end of this spring, getting ready for next year. We loop fourth and fifth, so this year's fifth graders had those kids last year. So by the time they're in fifth, they've really hit the ground running with deep commitments to their kids and to the kids' responsibility to the community in the class and the community in the school, and then beyond. So you'll see in your bullets some ideas of, in the big picture, there's been community outside of the school. They've made lunches for the Friendship Center. They've worked with getting used clothing supplies over to Catholic Charities. They've done some work supporting the Student Credit Union. They also in-house do a lot of buddy work with younger kids. Some of the pictures you might see there, the bottom group in the gym there are fifth graders leading our Beverly J. Martin birthday celebration, because January 4th was the actual birthday of Beverly. This is Ms. Beverly J. Martin. And the fifth graders had written a book 2 years before, and the fifth graders were leading the learning about Beverly J. Martin. You'll also see they're studying with the DA. Up there, the man in the suit is talking with them about leadership as elected officials and appointed officials, and what is the role of government in leading for the common weal. They were really interested in the word wheel. That's another story. Up in the left, you'll see some kids. You can't see it on the slide. If we went zooming in, you'd see that the girl in the middle is holding her pledge that she wrote. I pledge allegiance to Beverly J. Martin. And they had the kids writing, if you were pledging allegiance to something, what would that be about? How would you make that be about leadership and kindness? The kids developed the Peace and Kindness Council, and that's what some of these other pictures are. The girl with the computer down here developed on her own a series of pictures and words about being kind that she's going to teach this Wednesday, tomorrow morning, to the kindergartners of different ways, and then they check off when they do that, and then she made them coloring sheets and she made them awards, so then when they do that, they get awards for being kind. The kids in the upper right are writing the kindness challenges, and they're writing a play about bullying and some kid on the bus. I don't know, it's all from them. It's very, very student-led. We're just supporting them to make sure they, have the space during lunch and recess to do it. They're doing some amazing work. They're leading some of our programs on Fridays, and again, the goal is to take what we've learned in 2 years from these kids and turn it into something that when you enter fifth grade, you should expect and look forward to the following guidelines and the following sort of demands placed on you, and then within that to give kids a lot of choice about how to do it. So the last but right now, my most pressing and important thing, and I really want you guys to know this. I feel like you guys definitely know about case studies and that they're happening in all the schools and cool things are happening in many of our buildings. But I need you to know about this grant that we're on our 3rd year on. The first thing that I actually want you to know is at that bottom line, is we are one of only 2 school districts that we know of in the nation who are doing this. The first school district to do this was Tacoma, Washington, which has many, 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 many more children than we do. And we modeled this after it. We have a partnership with Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency for this grant. It comes from HUD funding through a block grant to the IURA to us. The premise, the key premise is that kids who experience homelessness often experience it more than once, and they are at a much higher risk for limited school success. So the gist of the contract of the grant is we have a contract, not a contract like Amanda has to worry about, but a contract with the families that if you come into our school and you become homeless or you enter as a homeless family, and there's a few other eligibility things related to that. If you partner with our social worker, who's funded by this grant, 0.4 of her position, district funds 0.6, 0.4 is funded by this grant. You agree to work with her on goal planning that's very individualized to what's going to help you become a person who can sustain their housing, not for 1 year, but for 3 and 4 and 5 years. Because if you get through 1 year, that doesn't mean you're done. We have found that with patterns of folks. And you have to also be engaged and actively involved in your kids' schooling. That can look like conference attendance, event attendance, making sure your kids doing their music lesson, their homework, answering phone calls, making sure that they're reading at home. We have some very specific ways in which they're going to do that. If you agree to do those things, the Ithaca Housing Authority agrees to move you to the very top of the next open house list, the next open apartment list. And as a result, our families who are in the grant, we have many homeless families, families who are experiencing homelessness. We're trying not to identify them as they're from their housing. We have many of them at BJM, and we have 14 in this program right now, which has just about the social worker about over the top, because there's only this many slots. They will move you to the top, and we have not had any families stay more than maximum a month in a shelter or hotel. Usually it's about 2 weeks before they get into stable housing. And we have a series of community partners. They're also listed on your page there in that first paragraph. We get $27,000 that we write every year. We write this grant. We have to write it again this February. We're finishing our 3rd year. It is super successful. It is the Ithaca Housing Authority and the IURA love this work. And I'm just going to give you a little sample story. Most of our families are headed by single women, and there's usually 2 or 3 children. And there's lots of things that I could tell many very, very good stories. I have a whole pile of success stories. But I want to tell you about this guy who's 30 years old, just turned 30, and I might have my special eye in for him because he's just a notch older than my own son. He became a father. His daughter is 10. He became a dad, but wasn't parenting her. And then, but was around. He knew her. They did a little pizza here and there, but he wasn't parenting her. Had never had to have his own lease. Had never had his own apartment. Had never had to apply for anything, take care of anything. They were living down in the city. He was off on his own, having a good time, visiting his kid now and then. And then his kid's mom died of complications from disease. And he stepped in. This was this past summer. Moved from the city up here because he had a grandma up here who he thought might be able to help them out. She helped them out for a short time that she could house them without losing her own housing. And since August, he has learned, he procured an apartment, figured out how to furnish it with, all this with the social work help. He got hooked up with AFCU and their microloan program because nobody would buy, and he had no credit, he had debt and, had abused the credit card and stuff. Got himself linked in with AFCU for the microloans program and has improved his credit. Got a job and is keeping in, has already been offered a promotion for the focus on his work. He comes to school, drops her off, brings her, picks her back up. He's gotten involved in helping participate. I don't want to say too much of what he does because I don't want to give away his identity, but he's very involved now in some aspects of the school and her work. He also figured out how to get her on Medicaid and him on Medicaid, how to get get into the family self-sufficiency program, that if you do it, it involves you, you get some payback later, you get some credits for some stuff. He now has a goal, he's working towards his GED. We are so proud of him, he comes in the building, we just want to hug him. He's working on his GED now. He will get that GED, he has a goal of a vehicle, and he's gonna start looking into SNAP benefits, because he hasn't had to apply for that before. Her attendance is great. Her participation is great. Her grades are, her academic success and her achievement is at a high level. She takes herself really seriously. And when her mom was ill and she didn't have her dad on her side in the city, she was hardly going to school. So for me, that's like taking lots of the best pieces of this and putting it into a situation where a young man could have just totally blown it and not known how to manage himself. So I wanted all of you all to know about this program that we're finishing, well, we're in the middle of our third year. When we first applied for the grant, they said it was a 3-year grant. So they're like, well, okay, fourth year, all right, go ahead and apply again, what the heck, we'll try to do that. Lisa Rieger is also helping us work on a grant with, I think, the Oak Foundation, in case we don't get the grant from the IURA. But again, looking for a grant that year after year is gonna kick out $27,000 from a large foundation. Again, if they wanna fund this kind of work, that's great, but it's also a lot of work every year to be doing that grant. So I'm hoping that in another part, we'll have a conversation about more about that, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the whole Megillah. But as a district, we should be super, super proud of this model, and we should be exporting it. This should be happening in every district and every state. This is remarkable way. This is remarkable grant.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that really great stuff, and I'm also really happy to hear about this, what you're doing with that. And I do just have a question in terms of resources and needs. And I personally, I love the idea of having more kind of wraparound services in terms of supporting families. In terms of you said the social worker that you have, it's almost a lot for her. Like so, yeah. Are there resources that where does the district's resources, or how would it help meet that, support that grant?
Is this the right place for the conversation? Here we go. Okay. Right now, we have 0.6 FTE for our social worker, and so she gets to work a 1.0 job because 0.4 of it is in the grant. Only 0.6 of her work goes towards her tenure, though, so she's like really working her tail off, but it's not going towards her tenure. And if we're always at risk of not getting a grant to continue this kind of excellent program, that feels like at this point, after 3 years of showing how well we do this, we would like to see the district put in the other 0.4 so that it's a 1.0 position. What I think a housing authority has said to us is that should the district feel that they can do that, and I have shared some ideas with Mary and Lily about how I thought that could happen. Should the district feel like it can do that, the IHA would no longer be tied into an IURA grant about it, right? It wouldn't be part of an agreement they had through their HUD funding, but their board is so happy with this work that the director there is very certain from her conversations with the board that they would continue to do the push to the top of the housing list. And because what they do is they have a certain number of vouchers, and to fund those open spots. And so they would continue to put aside 5 a year. And we would continue to operate in our mind on a 3-4 year cycle. But like we're on year 3, we have 14 families, we had a 5th one move out of state, but that voucher got used, right? So we have 14 families and the 0.4 is barely covering it. But on the 3rd year, people need less work, right? They need less help, they're meeting their goals, they have check-ins. The 1st year is very intensive, and it's work well put in.
It's pretty impactful for the kids.
And in terms of resources, in addition, we're very good at garnering those. You know, like we worked with the reuse center to get a mom. We contributed money from our Families Together budget, $30 towards this mom getting a refurbished computer, which she was able to do to get a job and go to school. We had somebody donate a desk because she had nowhere to do her work. She's succeeding in school and she wants to develop a small business. Because of things like she finally got the computer and the desk to carve out a spot to work. You know, so sometimes it's little stuff and those resources we know how to gather.
Thanks.
Anything else? Any other questions?
I'm looking at E. Are you?
Yep, I have a question, just trying to formulate it so it's
That's a
succinct and
surprise,
don't waste our time. The data's out there about the connection between how vulnerable families are in that position and the kids' academic performance or social, emotional, however we want to measure.
Right.
You just told us a good story, but overall, if we have 14, 17 families, how are the kids in general doing in the school?
That's why I think that we feel so happy about the success, is that they have better attendance than many of the kids. I can't think of, we have one of our families where the child is really, his mother deals with depression, he deals with depression, we're heading him towards counseling. His depression gives him some days when he wants to sort of opt out of his day. He's a 3rd grader, we don't want him to opt out of school in 3rd grade. But he's getting pretty closely wrapped around, even today that came up. I feel like the kids in these families over these 3 years have, across the board, as good or better of outcomes as our kids who are doing their best. I mean, it's like you could pick them out, like, yes, 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 yes. We're really proud of that.
Anyone else?
Thoughts, other questions?
You good? You good?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thank you.
Outstanding, Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Oh, Amanda. Do you want to pass
I
her a
realize
slide?
that the life that I lead does not lend me to have as many pictures as Samantha. And it makes me sad, my life is really like not full of color and vibrancy.
I'm sure she'll let you borrow
You
that
could be
list.
Cardinal and Gold. You too could be Cardinal and Gold.
Thank you for sharing that, Amanda.
I just, it made me sit back there saying, you know, I don't get out much. So, which is probably a good thing for the taxpayers of the biggest city school district, because that means that we're focusing, it's budget season. See that segue there. So, really I'm here very, very briefly, and I am keeping track of the score, Dr. and I don't want to talk about it right now. That I'm just going to give a very brief overview. We do this every year. This sets the stage. We've already begun the work. We do this all year long, but officially the planning of the next year's budget has just really already begun in a very robust way. We pretty much met with every single budget developer, those folks in the room included. Tricia, you can go to the agenda here. We're going to go through 3 very simple things. We're going to talk a little bit and just remind folks about the process. Those evolve every year. We'll remind folks about the calendar and sort of what to look for. You'll be seeing a lot of me every month at the meetings, but not long presentations, I promise. And then some of the priorities. Those typically may evolve and change every year as well. So those are some of the things that don't remain as static. So Tricia, just our process. Obviously, as I said, that first box We've already met with budget developers, we do sort of that round one. This is where we collect all of the ideas. It's really sort of like okay, I know this is coming my way, I know this grant is ending, I know that we're gonna need this equipment, I know that we're gonna need these supplies, I know that we're gonna, we're starting this new curriculum, and so we're gonna need all these manipulatives to go with it. We do all of that work with the budget developers. We talk a little bit about staffing, we talk a lot about the needs of the kids, the needs of the staff people, and we pull that all together. When we do that, we bring that back both to the business office. What a tremendous team we have in the business office. They are the best. They are absolutely the best. And Angela Jordan is just an absolute gift for New York State, let alone the biggest city school district. We get to have her. I'd put her up against the nation, actually. So we vet those things, Angela and I, we pull that all together into a larger document. We have that gas moment of all of those, requests that go into the large document. We're way over what we know we're bringing in revenue, and that's okay, because we have partners. Everybody knows this sort of the way that this works. And I keep pointing behind me because 2, 3, 4 of the key partners are in the room now. Where we get it, right? We put down everything, we start to work together, we start to prioritize, we start to say things like, okay, Samantha has a conversation with Paul and with Beth and says, who can pick that up? And we start to kind of figure those things out, and Susan says, well, I can give that up for 1 year because I really need this, and that's okay because I can work with this group to do that. And we just really have gotten to a place now where this is very understood and there's collaboration there, truly. We do a lot of work, especially Dr. Brown. This is where he, brings this information back and forth. There's a constant interplay between the community stakeholders, and you can define community in many different ways. That could be our own staff, inside community stakeholders, and then outside groups, community stakeholders. Talking about sort of what this looks like and getting feedback, and then obviously the key players here is the board. Because ultimately, it's the superintendent recommending the budget to the board, who then takes that to the voting public. The next one is just sort of going through the remaining months, and this is we're like fast track. Although we do this all year and we're always analyzing, and there's really not a lot of surprises when we get to January, this is really sort of the dates that are set for us by the state. And so these are sort of our key points that we need to hit, and that Tricia and I meet now quite often. Okay, what needs to go out when? What by law has to sort of go to the newspapers? What has to be mailed? What goes into resolutions for the board? And so it's very predictable in many ways, but all along the way you can see we're doing tremendous development, and that is truly what it is. We're developing it as we go in terms of the budget, and then the outreach also looks, it grows every single year. Ultimately, that will go to a budget adoption in April. A lot of communication planning goes into this. We just had a meeting today to start the budget communication planning process with our internal communication team. And then obviously a lot of information will be pumped out through the website, through mailers, so that people will go to the polls very educated in May, so that they know exactly what it is that they're voting on. The priorities, these 4 elements are no surprise to anyone. These are the big 4 that we usually put into our budget development process. And Tricia, that next slide actually gives some information about them. Revenue drives most things, right? If we don't have the money coming in and we can't support the operations, there is a gap. Sometimes we identify that. So that revenue, in Ithaca, it's pretty simple. It's based on our tax levy, which comes from a tax cap calculation. So those factors are being released now. We should know our state aid runs. They said they should give us the preliminary ones tomorrow or the next day. We already know.
On the governor's budget?
On the governor's budget. We already know a little bit about the factors that go into the tax cap. It's a 2%, just like last year it's capped. They don't go above 2% in terms of the growth factor. And then we have a local growth factor that also came in, and we have that number as well. So we'll be looking at the governor's budget starting tomorrow. That'll be released. And then the state aid obviously goes through that. If there is a gap between that revenue and then that next line, expenditure, right? And we have expenditure, we're starting to go into a number of negotiations. That's a huge factor. The majority of our budget, I think upwards of 75% of our budget is salary and fringe. And so all the remaining pieces are all of the other things that keep the lights on and make the buses run and all of that. So a tremendous amount of our budget is based on those collectively bargained agreements that will be at the table negotiating. Health insurance is another expenditure factor, obviously, not so much in terms of the actives, but more some of the decisions that we made around the retirees. We'll be looking at that and trying to do some predictions around what that looks like for us in terms of budgeting. This is our second year of being self-funded, so those are still, it's difficult to sort of get that narrowed down in terms of what that budget should be. However, we did a pretty good job in year one. We were within about $100,000 in terms of what we budgeted and what we spent, so that was excellent. And then obviously curriculum and instruction, there are board goals, right? There are goals within all of the buildings. We work together to bring those in all the departments. I sit there and I think, wow, that's so awesome when I hear, all the things that are happening in the buildings and departments, especially like athletics, and you say, we wanna fund those. And so a lot of that is the evaluation of what we've always been doing. Do we do it differently? Do we do it better? Do we need new funding to do it? Do we reallocate funds, right, to do things? And those are all conversations that we have with our budget developers. Again, once that sort of expenditure conversation happens, the fund balance fills in those blanks between what we're bringing in and what we need to go out, and we make long-range planning decisions around that, because those are not things that we would use all of the time. Those would be elements of budget planning that we would use in certain years with plans to bring in revenue in other years from other sources, because if you use it and you don't replenish it, it's gone. And so we want to make sure that we're continuing to talk and look at that. And then obviously that little long range planning is there in terms of the fund balance, but that's overall, right, sustainability of programs, grants that are coming on and off, and then just making sure that we're very, very good this year. And we did a little bit of a test run with the Smart Schools allocation of keeping the budget planning process and dialogue separate from the capital planning process and dialogue. That vote will be happening at the same time. And so we're gonna really wanna make sure that we keep those two elements very separate and we educate on both of them and we give both the time and energy that is necessary, but those will be two separate propositions and very separate elements that we'll be going to the public with. And so we wanna make sure that there's clarity in terms of what is sort of the general fund and then the debt service piece, how that relates to capital project. So those are sort of the goals for this year, and our conversations will continue.
Thank you, Brooke.
You're welcome.
Wow. Well, that was very, very, that was
My
very
roots
good.
from New Jersey show sometimes, so, I hope that
But
I'm
the,
Nothing.
Right, I tried.
Laura, go ahead.
I want to go back to the process.
Sure.
The process, so let's go.
So, one more. Yep, right
Okay,
there.
so I think it would be really helpful for all kinds of people who aren't necessarily in this room but might be listening or at some point listening, is to get really specific about how we solicit community stakeholder feedback. Where can members, how, when, where can members of the community react to what is being proposed in the steps beforehand, and certainly before it comes to adoption, because I think that's key, so.
You
I
wanna speak to
can
that?
talk about the evolution of that process.
Sure.
It began, going back 7 or 8 years, it was us having a budget advisory committee that had representatives from various stakeholders throughout our community. And that group met, the first year we met maybe 6 or 7 times. And they would look at every budget recommendation, they would even look at it line by line. As we've evolved, and quite frankly, as there's become more trust in the fact that we have a year-round process, we now get feedback from the stakeholder groups that we meet with monthly, i.e. PTA Council, the EILC. Those groups are represented on that advisory council before. Now we meet with them monthly, and we have year-round budget conversations like we do here. We have our website, which is always being updated, where folks can go, and we actually have the Let's Talk portal. We get questions year-round and suggestions year-round there too. So we've shifted more to, it's not a 2 or 3 month process. We go out and try to find out what people think, and it's now year-round. But we still do, we have been doing the budget roadshow, we call it. And now this year we may have to call it budget roadshow, and we're doing the capital project roadshows now. So we may need to term it differently this year so folks know we're talking about the budget or the annual budget this year, but we'll do those again. We'll do the town hall conversation where we've engaged in two-way dialogue for the last 5 years. So many different ways, man, am I leaving some
Two
out?
of the things, student groups,
Yeah, we do that.
we've done some outreach to students. I'm the superintendent's advisory counselor. I've gone directly, like LACS and has invited me, and I've actually done, held the mic in the round and chatted about things, which was really fun. The high school, government classes, they've called me, and I'm happy to do those as well. Especially, any of the leadership groups that has the ability to then spread that information out. There are many people that can vote in your schools, and so to be educated, to be able to go to the polls is really fantastic. And then also we've done in the past, and we didn't get really great attendance, we've done a lot of professional development sessions. What is the budget and what does the budget mean to me? And we didn't do them last year because they weren't well attended the year prior. And so that's something that we can always bring out again and try that. I'm happy to put some things on my learning plan and people can sign up. And we can actually, those that came, we really did a deep dive because there was just a few people in the room and we really kind of looked at the different budget line items and they were able to go back to their buildings and then do that. Every now and again, they get an invitation to do a staff meeting at buildings as well. And that's really up to the principals and the time that they have available. They're really crunched for time. And so, the push out of information with the invitation to give feedback, maybe not so much being on site, I think that might be something we could utilize technology a little better. We talked about video snippets too, maybe putting little video pieces that people then could have some comments to, or a Google form that they could fill out and then submit with further questions, or an ongoing Q&A. Those are all things that we've tried, dabbled in, thought about. I mean, we're ever
And our
moving forward
committee
on that.
meetings are open to the public.
The finance committee meetings are actually super well attended.
Yeah.
They really are. So I'm always so pleased with the growth of that meeting, and they're well announced in terms of the topics that we're going to deal with, and that really is where that budget is just absolutely played around with, and the questions are asked. So that's another venue for folks, and we could do a better job of announcing those meetings as well.
But we do need to figure out ways to increase engagement around this process
Sure,
in
always.
the budget. I mean, in my experiences, folks only engage in the budget process if they hear about something being cut. It has meaning to them.
Right.
And that's when people engage.
Threaten.
Right, so-
Threaten a lot of stuff.
And because we have year-round conversations, it's about building a budget versus cutting one. And if you were here last year when this one was filled with 100+ people, and I begged for their engagement around this process as much as they were giving around the fine and performing arts, and we've heard nothing. So I am constantly looking for ways to engage folks around this $120+ million decision that our community is asked to make each year, and I'm open to any and all feedback on that.
But certainly appreciate the effort that's gone into the other big item in the bond referendum coming up on the same day. At DeWitt Monday, be appointed on Thursday. Really have to get the word out that, when you see the PTA, that everyone's coming to talk about really what the possibilities that we may be able to do going forward. That would be great too. That's a great opportunity to talk to the admin team and a few board members about what's this all about. And how can it affect this school, how it affect when my kids at Poynton and what's high school gonna look like in a few years. Hopefully it'll look different, and but what is that gonna look like? I would probably be kind of interested to see what are you all talking about. So but it's it's participation in those events is going to be a great opportunity to talk to folks, and we've had great conversations in those meetings, just about anything and everything basically. So. Are we good? Anything else for a minute? Thanks.
Thank you.
Pretty rocking presentations tonight, Dr. Brown. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
It's a sustainable approach to leadership, Rob.
Okay, all right. So we have a few more items that we need to roll through. Appoint advocacy liaison to, what are we liaisoning with? Or whom to, or it's on the agenda, so
I didn't know what this was.
I didn't know what it was
I didn't put
either.
it on the agenda, but generally, maybe just an annual thing, that I currently do that, and it's for, basically NISBA, when they have something they want us to advocate on, it's the contact person.
I'll
Okay.
move the appointment of Ann Rutland as our advocacy liaison in Lisbon.
Second?
Second.
Second by Pat, all in favor? That's every, we've got 5. Right,
We're good.
Not a lot of discussion needed for that one because Ann is the obvious choice. Dr. Brown, when there's an obvious choice and the best choice, go ahead with that. All right. And then the National School Boards Association Conference attendance.
I'll move the approval of the expenditures for the NISBA conference.
I was gonna attend as well.
We need more to that, but.
With a 4th added.
Okay. With, okay, very good. Seconded by,
Oh, I'll second it.
seconded by Pat, all right. All in favor? That's everyone. Okay. And resolution that you see there.
I'll move the resolution as presented to designate and appoint a legal counsel.
Second.
Second by Moira. It's, we've seen it, we know what it's about, all in favor? That's everyone. That's the. Good, Dr. Brown? We're going too fast, Dr.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that.
Any other?
We okay?
I mean, right, I mean, just,
I think we're all right. Yeah, we'll be.
all right. So, okay. I heard a fix. Do we need to fix?
No, it's just, that resolution is going to be public. We can vote on it, but it's not a public.
But we voted on it, right. We did not have.
It's in the agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the upcoming dates of importance and the policy work session. It's the 28th, but that's a Wednesday.
Yes.
Okay.
It was rescheduled.
Right.
All right. That way.
Facilities and finance,
Or is
next
it,
Tuesday.
it's a Monday, right? Moira, not
Oh,
Wednesday.
maybe, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 'cause
Is it
usually
Monday?
It's Monday.
Monday, okay.
Yeah.
I just knew it wasn't a Tuesday.
Not a Tuesday.
All right. And if it's Tuesday, it must be finance and facilities somewhere.
Finance and
Right.
facilities, next Tuesday.
It's a movie, it's a movie. It's an old movie.
It's a country song.
We can move to a larger space.
Yeah.
Make it too cold.
Anything else? Are we good?
It's not available on the schedule.
That's it? We good? Okay, very good. Outstanding, everyone. Susan, tremendous work at BGM. Samantha, thank you very much for all your work for the athletic department. And really appreciate that. Amanda, thank Angela for all the work. So we will see some folks on Thursday at Boynton at 5:30, I believe.
Yeah.
Because the duet was 6:30, 5:30 at Boynton.
5:30, more than 5.
5:30 on my calendar. It's a great opportunity to go around and visit schools, and even though it's at night, you can see what's going on. All right.
Look at that. It's 44:20. I thought you were
Excuse me, Dr.
I misunderstood about what the score was at halftime.
So who's Virginia playing?
Virginia Tech.
Oh, the Hokies. Okay. Well, get a real name and then try to. So without objection, I still have 5 minutes to go try to play basketball, so I'm going to go do that. And we're adjourned, right?
I'm gonna make you eat a piece of his own cake.
Well.
Oh, yeah, we have a little.